Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books so you can find your next read. Let's get started. Today we're taking a deep dive into Bringing Ben Home, A Murder, a Conviction, and the Fight to Redeem American Justice by Barbara Bradley Haggerty. It's a true crime story that had me hooked from the very first page.
It's a gripping story, all right, and it raises some really important questions about our justice system. The book centers around Ben Spencer, a man who spent decades in prison for a murder he may not have committed.
Okay, let's unpack this. The book starts in 1987 Dallas with the murder of Jeffrey Young, a successful businessman. The crime scene investigation was, well, a bit of a mess, to say the least.
Right from the start, things were chaotic. The police actually auctioned off Young's car, his BMW where he was found murdered, before a thorough investigation could be completed.
You've got to be kidding me. They auctioned off a key piece of evidence. Talking about a contaminated crime scene. It's mind-boggling how they could have made such a fundamental error. So how did they even land on a suspect with this botched investigation?
That's where Ben Spencer enters the picture. A young black man with no prior connection to the victim. He was convicted based solely on eyewitness testimonies, even though there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime.
With DNA evidence becoming so crucial in modern investigations, I'm guessing this lack of physical evidence played a significant role in Spencer's story. Was DNA technology even available back then?
It was in its very early stages, and it wasn't used in Spencer's case. This becomes a recurring theme throughout the book, highlighting how the lack of DNA evidence can make it incredibly difficult to overturn a wrongful conviction, even when there are other doubts about the case.
So with this chaotic investigation as the backdrop, let's see how Ben Spencer ended up as the prime suspect. The book mentioned something called tunnel vision. Can you explain what that means and how it might have impacted the investigation?
Tunnel vision is a term used to describe what happens when investigators get fixated on one suspect early on, and then, often subconsciously, filter all evidence through that lens. They might overlook other possibilities or even interpret ambiguous evidence as supporting their initial theory. It's a form of confirmation bias, which can be incredibly powerful and difficult to overcome.
It's almost as if they've already decided who's guilty before all the facts are in. Did the book give any specific examples of how tunnel vision might have played a role in Spencer's case?
Absolutely. The author, Barbara Bradley Haggerty, points to several instances where investigators seem to have ignored or downplayed evidence that didn't fit their narrative about Spencer's guilt. For instance, there was another potential suspect, a man named Michael Hubbard, who had some intriguing connections to the crime, but he was never seriously considered.
Wait, they had another possible suspect right from the start. And they didn't investigate him properly. That's a huge red flag. It makes you wonder how many other cases might have been affected by this kind of tunnel vision. What about the eyewitness testimonies? Did the book go into detail about those?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting. The book introduces us to several key witnesses, and their testimonies on closer examination were far from rock solid. One witness, Sandra Brackens, initially gave a statement that aligned with the prosecution's case, but later she recanted, saying she had been pressured by the police.
So, a key witness for the prosecution changes her story. This raises serious questions about the reliability of eyewitness testimony in general, doesn't it? I mean, if someone can be pressured or influenced to give a false statement, how can we be sure anyone is telling the truth?
You're hitting on a crucial point. Eyewitness testimony has long been considered a cornerstone of our justice system. But as DNA evidence has exonerated more and more people, it's become clear that eyewitness accounts are often unreliable.
This makes me think about something else the book mentioned: belief persistence. Could you explain that concept and how it might have affected those involved in the Spencer case?
Belief persistence is the tendency to cling to our initial beliefs even when presented with contradictory evidence. It's a psychological phenomenon that can affect everyone, from investigators and prosecutors to judges and even jurors. In Spencer's case, it seems that several key players remained convinced of his guilt even as new evidence emerged, casting doubt on the original verdict.
It's almost like our brains try to protect us from the discomfort of admitting we were wrong. Even if that means clinging to a belief that's no longer supported by the facts, this has to be a major challenge for anyone trying to overturn a wrongful conviction.
It absolutely is, and it's one of the reasons why innocence organizations like Centurion Ministries are so vital. They often have to fight an uphill battle against not just the evidence, but also the deeply ingrained beliefs of those who are convinced of a defendant's guilt.
Speaking of Centurion Ministries, how did they get involved in Ben Spencer's case?
From prison, Spencer relentlessly sought help, desperately trying to find someone who would believe him. His search led him to Centurion Ministries, a pioneering organization dedicated to fighting wrongful convictions. The founder, Jim McCloskey, was deeply moved by Spencer's letters and felt there was something deeply wrong with his conviction.
So this organization really digs into cases where there's a strong suspicion of a miscarriage of justice. What was their initial approach to Spencer's case? Did they focus on finding new evidence?
They did. Centurion Ministries meticulously investigated every aspect of the case, re-interviewing witnesses, examining the physical evidence, and searching for anything that might have been overlooked. Their hope was to find something, anything, that could cast doubt on Spencer's
Oh,
guilt.
sounds like they were leaving no stone unturned. What did they uncover in their investigation?
One of their early focuses was on a potential DNA lead. Fingernail clippings from the victim, Jeffrey Young. These clippings had been collected at the crime scene but were somehow misplaced for years.
Misplaced evidence. It seems like this case was plagued by errors from the very beginning. What was the hope with these fingernail clippings?
If there had been a struggle between Young and his attacker, there was a chance that the attacker's DNA might have been found under Young's fingernails. It was a long shot, but it was a glimmer of hope in a case that seemed hopeless.
So they were hoping to find DNA that would either exonerate Spencer or point to someone else entirely. What happened with the fingernail clippings? Were they ever found?
After a long and frustrating search, the fingernail clippings were located. The possibility of finding DNA evidence was finally within reach.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Did the DNA testing finally provide the breakthrough Spencer and Centurion Ministries had been hoping for? Did it point to the real killer?
Well, the DNA testing did provide a definitive result, but it wasn't the clear-cut answer everyone was hoping for. The DNA under Young's fingernails belonged to Young himself.
Oh, wow. So no match to Spencer, but also no match to anyone else. What a letdown. It must have felt like a huge setback for Spencer's hopes of freedom.
It was a major disappointment. However, Centurion Ministries didn't give up. They continued to investigate, focusing on other aspects of the case. They dug deeper into the witness testimonies, looking for inconsistencies or anything that might suggest coercion or undue influence.
This is where the book really shines a light on the complexities of memory and the fallibility of eyewitness accounts. It makes you realize how easily our recollections can be swayed or even manipulated.
Exactly. The book delves into a fascinating and somewhat unsettling area of forensic science, the secret scandal, as Haggerty calls it.
Okay, you've got to tell me more about this secret scandal. What's the big reveal?
As DNA evidence gained prominence, it began to expose the flaws in many traditional forensic techniques that were once considered reliable. Techniques like bite mark analysis, hair comparisons, and even fingerprint analysis, which were often presented as irrefutable evidence in court, turned out to be much more subjective and prone to error than previously believed.
Are you saying these methods weren't based on solid science? That they were basically just educated guesses dressed up as forensic evidence, and people were being convicted based on this shaky science?
It's shocking, isn't it? The book gives some startling examples of how these flawed forensic techniques led to wrongful convictions. It really challenges the notion that forensic science is always objective and infallible.
This completely changes my perception of forensic evidence. I always thought it was, actual science, based on hard facts and data. But it seems like there's a lot of room for human error in interpretation.
That's one of the key takeaways from the book. It forces us to question what we consider to be scientific proof, and to recognize that even in disciplines like forensic science, bias and human judgment can play a significant role.
So as Centurion Ministries continued their investigation, did they uncover any evidence related to these flawed forensic techniques that might have been used in Spencer's case?
They did. One of the key pieces of evidence used against Spencer at his trial was hair analysis. A hair found at the crime scene was said to be microscopically consistent with Spencer's hair. But as we now know, hair analysis is far from an exact science.
It seems like the more we learn about forensic science, the more we realize how much we don't know. It's a bit unsettling to think that someone's life could hinge on evidence that's later proven to be unreliable. Did Centurion Ministries uncover anything else that pointed to Spencer's innocence?
They did. They interviewed several new witnesses, whose testimonies contradicted the prosecution's narrative. One witness, Farrell Scott, came forward to say he had seen another man, someone who looked nothing like Spencer, near the victim's car around the time of the murder.
So new witnesses with potentially crucial information emerge years after the trial. This begs the question, why didn't these witnesses come forward sooner? Did the book shed any light on that?
It does. In some cases, witnesses may be afraid to come forward. especially if they fear retaliation or don't trust the authorities. Others may simply not realize the significance of the information they possess until much later. And sometimes, as in the case of Sandra Brackens, witnesses may initially give false statements under pressure and only recant their testimony years later.
It seems like the pursuit of justice is often a long and winding road, filled with unexpected twists and turns. So we have a botched investigation, questionable eyewitness testimony, and flawed forensic evidence, all pointing to the possibility that an innocent man is behind bars. But what about the legal system? What avenues were available for Spencer to appeal his conviction and present this new evidence?
That's where things get even more complex. The book delves into the intricacies of the appeals process, the concept of finality in the legal system, and the reluctance of appellate courts to overturn jury verdicts.
So even with compelling new evidence and witness recantations, it's an uphill battle to get a conviction overturned on appeal.
It's incredibly difficult. The book details the many legal hurdles that Spencer and his team face. It's a stark reminder that even when there's a strong possibility of a wrongful conviction, the system isn't always designed to correct those mistakes easily.
It all sounds incredibly disheartening. Amidst all this legal back and forth, did the book delve into the human side of this story? How did Spencer cope with all those years behind bars? How did his family navigate this ordeal?
The book does a remarkable job of capturing the human cost of wrongful conviction. We see Spencer's unwavering faith, his determination to prove his innocence, and the emotional toll this ordeal took on him. We also see the unwavering support of his wife, Deborah, who never gave up hope and tirelessly advocated for his release.
It's inspiring to see that even in the face of such adversity, love and hope can persevere. What about Spencer's son, BJ? He was just a child when his father was imprisoned. How did this impact him?
The book provides a poignant glimpse into BJ's life growing up with a father in prison. We see the challenges he faced, the stigma associated with having an incarcerated parent, and the emotional strain it put on their relationship. Despite it all, BJ maintained a strong connection with his father, visiting him regularly and fiercely believing in his innocence.
It's heartbreaking to think of all the milestones, both big and small,
Yeah.
that Spencer missed out on during those years. But his story also highlights the ripple effects of wrongful conviction, how it impacts not just the individual, but also their loved ones. Did the book address the psychological impact of prolonged incarceration?
It does touch upon the psychological trauma that Spencer endured. Imagine the feeling of being stripped of your freedom, labeled a murderer, and separated from your loved ones for a crime you didn't commit. The book doesn't shy away from depicting the emotional and psychological scars that Spencer carried.
It's a sobering reminder of the human cost of our justice system's failures. But beyond the personal tragedy, Spencer's case also became a symbol of the larger fight for justice system reform. Did the book explore how Spencer's story contributed to this movement?
It does. Bringing Ben Home provides a powerful and insightful look at the evolution of the innocence movement, from its early days with organizations like Centurion Ministries to the rise of the Innocence Project and the growing awareness of wrongful convictions.
It's encouraging to see that this movement has gained momentum over the years, shining a light on systemic issues and fighting for those who have been unjustly imprisoned. Did the book highlight any specific reforms or changes that have been made as a result of this work?
Yes. One positive development that the book mentions is the establishment of conviction integrity units, or CIUs, in many district attorneys' offices. These units are specifically dedicated to reviewing potential cases of wrongful conviction.
So there's hope that the justice system is slowly moving towards acknowledging and addressing its flaws.
There are definitely signs of progress. However, as the book points out, there's still a long way to go. The fight for justice system reform is ongoing, and there's still much work to be done to ensure that innocent people aren't wrongfully imprisoned.
This is a complex issue with no easy solutions. But Spencer's story serves as a powerful reminder that we must keep pushing for a more just and equitable system. Now, I have to ask, after all these years of fighting, did Ben Spencer finally get the justice he deserved? Did he ever go home?
Spencer's case takes an interesting turn when a new district attorney, John Creuzot, takes office in Dallas. Creuzot, known for his progressive stance on criminal justice, had established a conviction integrity unit to re-examine questionable cases.
So the CIU enters the scene. That feels like a turning point. Did they agree to take on Spencer's case?
They did. Two dedicated prosecutors from the CIU, Cynthia Garza and Teresa Moore, were assigned to review Spencer's case. They meticulously examined all the evidence, old and new. What's fascinating is that the deeper they dug, the more inconsistencies and troubling revelations they uncovered.
That must have been quite a process. What were some of the key things they unearthed that cast doubt on the original verdict?
Well, remember Gladys Oliver, the prosecution's star witness, the one who testified she had only received a small reward from Crime Stoppers.
Yes, she was so adamant that she wasn't motivated by money. It seemed to be a point of pride for her.
Garza and Moore discovered that Oliver had actually received a substantial sum of money, likely from Ross Perot's company, a detail conveniently omitted from the original trial.
Wait, so the key witness wasn't truthful about the reward. This changes everything. For those who aren't familiar with legal terms, can you explain what a Brady violation is and why it's so significant in this case?
A Brady violation occurs when the prosecution withholds evidence that could be favorable to the defense, violating the defendant's right to due process. In this case, the prosecution had a legal obligation to disclose the substantial reward Oliver received, as it could have cast doubt on her credibility and motives. This discovery seriously undermined the integrity of the original trial.
It's incredible how one piece of information can have such a domino effect. Did the CIU find anything else that supported Spencer's claim of innocence?
They did. Remember Danny Edwards, the jailhouse informant who claimed Spencer had confessed to him?
Oh, right. His testimony always seemed a bit shaky to me, like he had an ulterior motive.
The CIU dug into Edwards' background and uncovered evidence that contradicted his trial testimony, suggesting that he might have fabricated the confession to gain favor with the prosecution.
So the prosecution's two key witnesses, Oliver and Edwards,
Yeah.
were now discredited. That must have been a major blow to their case. What was the CIU's final conclusion?
After their extensive investigation, Garza and Moore concluded that Spencer's original trial had been deeply flawed. They believed there was a high probability that he was wrongfully convicted.
What a vindication for Spencer and everyone who had been fighting for him. What happened next? Did they recommend a new trial?
Even better, District Attorney Creuzot, after reviewing the CIU's findings, made a bold decision. He filed a joint motion with Spencer's lawyers, asking the court to vacate Spencer's conviction and set him free.
Wow, that must have been an incredible moment for Spencer and his family. What was the judge's reaction?
Here's where the suspense builds. The judge acknowledged the serious questions surrounding Spencer's conviction, but didn't immediately grant the motion for release. The book describes the agonizing wait for the judge's final decision, leaving Spencer and his loved ones in a state of limbo.
The anticipation must have been unbearable after decades of wrongful imprisonment. To be so close to freedom and yet still waiting, it's almost too much to bear. So tell me, did Spencer finally go home?
Yes, he did. After 30 years behind bars, Ben Spencer was finally released from prison. The book captures the raw emotion of that day, the joy of his family and friends, the relief in Spencer's eyes, the bittersweet feeling of freedom after so much was lost. It's a moment that stays with you.
What a triumphant moment. But you said bittersweet. Why?
While Spencer was granted his freedom, he was not officially exonerated. Legally, without DNA evidence, proving his innocence beyond a shadow of a doubt was incredibly difficult.
So despite being released, there was still a cloud of suspicion hanging over him.
That's right. And to add another layer of complexity, the victim's family remained convinced of Spencer's guilt. It's a reminder that even when the legal system acknowledges a mistake, the wounds inflicted by a crime and the differing perceptions of justice can be incredibly difficult to heal.
This really highlights the limitations of the legal system. It's designed to determine guilt or innocence, but it can't always deliver true closure or reconciliation for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Did the book explore how Spencer navigated life after prison, especially with this lack of full exoneration?
It does. We see Spencer's struggles to adapt to a world that had changed drastically during his absence, and how he grappled with the lingering stigma of his conviction. He also faced the challenges of rebuilding relationships and finding his place in a society that often struggles to reintegrate those who have been incarcerated, even when they've been wrongly convicted.
Spencer's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the lasting impact of wrongful conviction, not just on the individual, but on their families and communities. It's a story that raises profound questions about our justice system, the nature of truth and memory, and the very essence of what it means to be free.
You've summed it up beautifully. Bringing Ben home is more than just a true crime story. It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the most unimaginable hardships, to hold on to hope even when it seems lost, and to fight for justice even when the odds are stacked against you.
It sounds like a book that will challenge readers to confront their own biases and assumptions about our justice system. And it reminds us that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing struggle, one that requires constant vigilance and a willingness to question the status quo.
Absolutely. One of the most poignant aspects of the book is the exploration of belief persistence, not just on the part of investigators and prosecutors, but also on the part of the victim's family. It shows how deeply entrenched beliefs, even when contradicted by evidence, can shape our perceptions of guilt and innocence.
It's a reminder that we all need to be open to questioning our assumptions and be willing to grapple with uncomfortable truths, especially when it comes to matters of justice. Bringing Ben home is a powerful testament to the importance of seeking truth and fighting for those who have been wronged, even when it seems impossible.
It certainly is. And it leaves us with this thought-provoking question. If Ben Spencer could endure decades of wrongful imprisonment with such grace and resilience, what does that say about the human spirit's capacity to overcome adversity and fight for what's right? What can we learn from his unwavering belief in himself, even when so many others doubted him?
Those are questions worth pondering. Bringing Ben Home sounds like a book that will stay with readers long after they turn the last page, prompting reflection, discussion, and hopefully a renewed commitment to fighting for a more just world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Bringing Ben Home. It's a story that I won't soon forget.
And thank you for such insightful observations. It's been a pleasure unpacking this compelling and important book with you.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge and spread the word.